what about other things like the app bar or the general look of this page? By default, we have the material design look here, because what we're using here in our main Dart file in the build method is this scaffold widget. And the scaffold widget here, by default, gives us a page for material design widgets. Now there also is a Cupertino, an iOS version of that. And this is another good place to point at the Flutter widget catalog again. Because in case you haven't noticed it yet, there also is a Cupertino iOS style widgets section. And that gives you an overview of all the widgets that are built into Flutter that have that Cupertino look, and which you can use in conjunction with that platform is check to render either the Cupertino widget or the default material widget. And for example, here we have the Cupertino page scaffold. And that's pretty interesting here. Instead of that scaffold, we could render the different one by again using platform is iOS. And if that is not true, so in the else case after the colon, I'll use the material design scaffold. Otherwise, I'll use the Cupertino page scaffold, which is kind of the replacement for that. Now important, to use any Cupertino widgets, you need to add an import to package_flutter/cupertino.dart. Just as we used material Dart before, now in addition to that, and I say in addition because we still use a couple of features from the material Dart package because it contains more than just material styled widgets. But in addition to that, you now also need to import the cupertino.dart file. It has less options than the material design scaffold, but it allows us to define a body, which here is named child. That's a bit of an inconsistency, which unfortunately or deliberately, I don't know, but which was introduced. But this is essentially what you have in body. And then you can set the background color of the page. You can also add a navigation bar. So here, the body, of course, should be the same. So I'll actually grab the entire body content, this entire single child scroll view, and cut it out of there and store it in a new variable. Again, so that I can reuse it. So here I'll have a page body variable. You can name it whatever you want. And the value is our page body. And now I can enter this here as a body for scaffold, but also as a child for Cupertino page scaffold. Because the thing which I change, or which I want to change here, is not the page body, but actually the navigation bar. There, instead of app bar, I want to use a specific app bar for Cupertino. Because here, we actually can use the Cupertino navigation bar. However, it's best if I don't add it here, but if I do add it up there, where I already created that app bar variable, to now again check the platform. So if platform is iOS, I want to render something different and only render the app bar if I'm on Android. And here I want to use my Cupertino navigation bar. That means that the app bar variable now holds either the Cupertino navigation bar or the material app bar. And hence I can use app bar down there in my Cupertino page scaffold, just as well as in the scaffold down here. And I'm doing this because I use my preferred size here, and that actually is taken from the app bar. And of course, I want to calculate the preferred size for both my Cupertino navigation bar as well as for this app bar. Now, a small problem we have here, though, is that I'm getting an error that preferred size is not defined on widget. The reason for that is actually that app bar is inferred to be of type widget here. Now that simply happens because Dart is not able to find out that Cupertino navigation bar and app bar both have a preferred size property. But actually, if we add a dot here after Cupertino navigation bar, we see there is a preferred size property. So this also, if you click on it, is in the end implementing some kind of preferred size widget. So we should tell Dart that this is the case by adding the type here, and that's one of the cases where it makes sense to explicitly set the type if you know what the type is but Dart can't find out, and set this to preferred size widget like this. Now you get rid of these type errors down there because you know, hey, this will be available at a point of time Dart is not able to find out. So with that, we now have a setup where we render a different navigation bar. Of course, we now also want to set a title, however, not with a title property here, but here instead you target the middle property, and space control is your friend here to find out what you can set on the Cupertino navigation bar. Middle here takes a widget, just like title does. It's just a different name. Again, some inconsistency here, but you can set your text there. Now, of course, you typically also want to add some actions here, though here you have no actions property, but instead you'll have a trailing property to add some content at the end of the bar. And that could be a row with your actions. And now here, important, icon button also would be a material icon. And if you try to use that in a Cupertino navigation bar, you would get an error. And now when you save that though, you'll get an error where we see that an icon button widget requires a material widget ancestor. The problem here in the end is that we added an icon button widget, which is a widget defined for material design inside of our Cupertino navigation bar, inside, in the end, of our Cupertino page scaffold. And as the error message tells us, material widgets, and the icon button is one of them, look for some parent widget somewhere which implements material design, and that's missing here. Now, since at the point of time I'm recording this, there is no Cupertino icon button, one thing we can do here is we can build our own button. We can add a gesture detector where I wire up on tap to start add new transactions, so to the same code I had down there for on pressed, like this. And where the child then is our custom button content. And our child here can be an icon widget, which is not a material design limited icon. And now we could use icons add, but actually to have that full iOS look, we might want to use Cupertino icons, which exists, add. So that's a collection of Cupertino icons. And again, just as with material icons with a dot here, you can go through them and find out which icons are included. Unfortunately, without a visual preview, at least for now, but still with a short description, and it's a pretty good list, pretty good mix of Cupertino icons. With that, if we save that and we restart our application here, we now have that plus icon up there, and it also opens that modal. Now what's clearly missing, however, is the title, the middle here, and that happens because I used a row here, and by default trailing has no boundaries in how big it may be, and therefore row is pretty large. That's fairly easy to fix though. On the row here, in our trailing part of the Cupertino navigation part, there's one extra property you can set on row and column, which I haven't shown you before, but which is really useful now, and that's the main axis size. By default, it takes all the width it can get as a row, and a column it takes all the height it can get. You can restrict this and set it to main axis size.min. So main axis size here really is just a enum with a max and a min value. The default is max, but if you set it to min, the row will shrink along its main axis, so from left to right, to be only as big as its children need to be. And therefore now we have the plus icon and our text here. And as you can tell, of course, this is now the default iOS look, and it's not that purple app bar we would normally have. Now, as you also can tell, however, is that now that's not really looking that good. The chart is now below our navigation bar. So somehow this calculation of the navigation bar height is not working out correctly.